One question I had is about the role that if somebody is intoxicated or drugged, or that element where there's an additional layer that really fragments memory, and maybe starting with you, if you could sort of help deepen our understanding of how we might still uncover or understand their stories despite those circumstances.
Well, so it's important to make distinctions about how intoxicated someone is. Someone can be pretty buzzed, they can even be drunk, but if they're not at a level where they're blacking out or passing out, they could still be encoding a lot of information. They could still be taking in those things that were particularly awful about that experience, that were particularly scary, disgusting, terrifying, whatever the awful sensations in their body as these things are being done to them. And so just because someone's pretty buzzed and had a number of drinks and there's a lot of gaps in their memory doesn't mean that the things that they do remember may not be very accurate and they may never forget them. So that's a really important point to make, that alcohol at moderate levels of intoxication, some other drugs too, they kind of mimic the effects of trauma. People burn in those what we call central details, the things that they couldn't help but notice under this attack, under this harassment, and the things that they weren't noticing, that's not getting encoded. And that more sophisticated encoding of how are these things sequenced in time, alcohol impairs that, even at these moderate doses. So alcohol and stress and fear can kind of conspire together to lead to these fragmentary memories, but it doesn't mean that the fragments that are there are not accurate and really important information to have. Now, when people are at high levels of intoxication, where they're blacked out much of the time, still what we see is that they have these little things that I think in the case was this idea of breakthrough things. You know, people, we have this saying like, oh, that sobered me up, right? It didn't really sober you up, but it gave you a burst of these stress chemicals that kind of brought you out of it for a second to, whoa, what's going on here? And the same thing can happen with memory, is people may not be taking in most of the experience, but they'll remember those particularly painful things or the particularly horrifying things. And sometimes the thing they remember is when they got their hopes up that it was going to end. And a lot of investigators don't know to listen for this and understand this, but that's sometimes the most memorable moment. When someone who was a bystander, they ducked their head in the door, said, what's going on? They thought it was going to end, and then it didn't. And other examples like that. But those are some of the main points I would make, that just because someone's drunk and their memory's got a lot of holes doesn't mean that what's there is not very important and could be very accurate.